Stool-Mutt, the official novel, Chapter 6, Butt Hunt 1. The TV was playing the local news channel, covering the fight that happened in the town square. Jaquavius walked out of the room, stumbling a little bit due to his hurt knee. "All right, what's the plan?" said Jaquavius. "We're going to look into all the information and technology we have on Buttman. The local police force has taken the robot we battered earlier," Stoneman said before Jaquavius cut him off. "You mean the BBA?" Jaquavius said with a snickering look on his face. They both laughed. "The police took in the android we fought, and the layer is mostly exploded, but we'll find what we can and figure out what's going on," Stoneman said, finishing what he said earlier. Stoneman got up, grabbed a backpack, and proceeded to throw canned food, his cube, a pocket knife, some rope, and other survival materials into the backpack. "We might be gone for a while. Help me pack up," Stoneman said without even batting an eye at Jaquavius, keeping focus on the task at hand. Jaquavius began to grab things as well and threw them into a bag of his own. He grabbed a sleeping bag, some water, and some canned food, a flashlight, and some bandages. "All right, I'm ready," said Jaquavius, walking out of the house and standing next to his friend. "Where to?" "You know, we might not be back for a long time, right?" Stoneman said with a worry in his eyes. "I got no one back home anyway," responded Jaquavius with a sense of sadness behind his voice. Stoneman and Jaquavius set off through the town, heading to their first stop, the lair. The sky was dark. It was a few hours after the battle in the town square, and not many people were walking the streets. Stoneman walked next to Jaquavius, conversing about movies and books they've been reading recently. The duo eventually walked up on the same beach where they had been only a few days ago. The moonlight glistened across the lake, illuminating something that looked metal underneath the lake. Stoneman and Jaquavius began to scale the mountain once again, giving both of them a sense of deja vu. Eventually, they reached the concrete platform protruding from the side of the mountain. The laboratory was in ruins, covered in ash, and all the machinery was destroyed. "Damn, this place is way worse than I thought it was going to be," Jaquavius said, while turning on the flashlight. The room was now illuminated by the flashlight, showing a more in-depth look at the cracking walls and the broken machinery. "I'll go check the computer and see if I can turn on the lights," Stoneman said as he walked over to the device. The computer's button was ashy and didn't do anything when clicked. There was no light switch anywhere in the room, so the lights remained off. "There doesn't seem to be a way to turn on the lights." Jaquavius walked over to the walls and suddenly noticed a corridor, the same corridor Buttman ran down. "Hey, Stoneman, come check this out. It's the corridor Buttman escaped through," Jaquavius said, calling over to Stool-Mutt. "The door must have been blown open during the explosion." "Huh. Guess we'll head down it," Stool-Mutt said, walking down the corridor. The corridor was dark and all the lights were off. The halls looked untouched considering the huge explosion that had happened a little bit over a week prior. Stool-Mutt looked around, searching for a light switch. He stumbled in the dark over to the nearest light switch, turning it on. The lights in the hallway were each individually turned on with a loud click sound. "He's kind of always had a knack for dramatic flair," Stool-Mutt said with a small laugh as the lights clicked on slowly. Stool-Mutt walked down the corridor as Jaquavius followed not far behind. "So, you got a girlfriend?" Jaquavius said, laughing, purposely sounding like a family member at an event, but Stool-Mutt took the question seriously. "Sadly, no. I've never actually had one because of how I look. No one has ever wanted me or even wanted to look at me in that kind of way," Stool-Mutt said with a bit of sadness behind his voice. "You?" Jaquavius looked at Stool-Mutt's side and spoke. "Nah, I'm way past that time. I got married young because of the birth of my daughter. My wife divorced me a year or so back, but she lets me see my daughter every now and then, so that's nice, I guess." The hallway was silent for a while. The hallway eventually stretched into a creepy, dimly lit stairwell. "Creepy," Stoneman said, walking down the stairs. "So, do you have a family, or—" Jaquavius said, finally breaking the silence. "Like, are they passed, or what happened to them?" No. They're perfectly okay. I just don't talk to them much. I was very lucky to grow up in a wealthy family. When I turned 18 last year or so, they moved to London and lent me their money to live. That's why I don't have a job, but I have a whole house," Stoneman responded, laughing. "Lucky. I gotta work my ass off," Jaquavius said with a bit of humor behind his tired voice. "How do you think our hospital bills were paid after the explosion?" said Stool-Mutt, laughing a fair amount now. Stool-Mutt jumped down the stairs as Jaquavius slowly stepped down, looking completely annoyed with his bullshit. "Have you ever been to a theme park?" Stool-Mutt asked, leaping down another 3 steps. "Like with roller coasters and shit?" "No, I haven't. Never had the time," Jaquavius said, yawning. "Oh, I have to take you one day," Stool-Mutt replied, shortly before tripping over his shoelace and falling down a step or two. Jaquavius laughed for a second, but reached down to help Stool-Mutt up from the hard concrete. Well, we're here. Wherever here is, Jaquavius said, lifting Stool-Mutt up after he tied his shoe, showing him the big metallic doorway with a blinking red light. Once the large metal gate opened fully, it revealed a vast laboratory with a wide array of machinery, all housed beneath a glass dome ceiling. Through the glass dome above, Stool-Mutt saw fish swimming past and bubbles coming from pipes leading outside. Eventually, after examining his surroundings, he realized they were under the lake. The room had an aroma of chemicals and baby dolls, and the floor glistened almost like it had just been mopped. He keeps this room pretty clean, doesn't he? Stool-Mutt spoke, attempting to break the silence, but Jaquavius didn't respond. Stool-Mutt began to walk over to one of the monitors and mess with the files and applications. He couldn't understand much of the encrypted code, just a lot of numbers and notes referring to something being satisfactory with test results. He moved on to another machine a few feet away that had a DNA sample on it with different labels on the nucleotides. The DNA was labeled with the name Charlie and had traits regarding building muscle and performance. Inside the glass container was an empty vial. You find anything? He yelled over to Jaquavius, who was looking through some paperwork. No, not really. Just notes scribbled onto papers and random comments about his parents, he yelled back. Stool-Mutt slid over to another table and glanced at some files labeled Enhancing Serum. The files discussed how using DNA from someone with significant muscle mass and overall good genes can enhance an organism or make machinery work in overdrive. Don't know how that works, but if it does, it does, Stool-Mutt thought. The next page shows images and information on testing he's done on a few animals. Next to a Polaroid of a pretty huge bluegill was a snippet of paper written. This fish has seemed to make extreme muscle and performance growth almost instantaneously since injecting the serum. Another image was a photo of a mouse with bulging muscles with the message written, "This mouse, just like the fish, made crazy amounts of muscle and strength growth immediately after injecting the serum." The last page of the group of files was labeled pros and cons. The pros were listed as, the serum makes you significantly stronger, boosts your muscle mass and performance, and it is pretty much instantaneous after injection. The one con written down was, will eventually work itself out of the blood system. At the very bottom of the page, one more thing was written, mission, give Stool-Mutt a good fight. Stool-Mutt got up, looking at all the powered-off machines with only a few still blinking, all of which were the ones he had looked over already, besides one that was blinking with electrical symbols. Stool-Mutt walked over to the machine, displaying wiring in a 2D blueprint of the android from Town Square. The blueprint showed models for the rocket boosters in the arms, the coils in the feet, and other mechanisms that didn't seem extremely important. In one section, there was a serum-fueled storage with an image of a green serum with piping and wires feeding off of it. Another highlighted section was labeled Inbuilt Navigator, with a sloppy note written by Buttman saying, coordinates for final stage of plan already inputted. Stool-Mutt got up from the monitor and walked over to Jaquavius, who was still looking perplexed at the scribbles of words. I know where we need to go. In the android, there's a navigator to coordinates leading to the final stage of his plan, Stool-Mutt said, pulling Jaquavius out of his deep thought. All right, now we just need to get out of here, Jaquavius replied, gesturing over to the now shut gate. It's shut while you were reading over some files, and it doesn't seem like there's a way to open it. Stool-Mutt walked over to the shut door, trying to force it open, but it didn't budge. There wasn't a keyboard, not a handle, not a lever. There was nothing to open the door. Well, damn it. It seems we're stuck, Stool-Mutt said, slamming his head against the door one last time. Jaquavius looked around the room, noticing a bunch of chairs and desks, and the only thing he could see that even looked like an exit was a hatch leading into the lake above. I mean, we could take that, Jaquavius said, pointing at the hatch in the dome above. Stool-Mutt, after taking a quick glance at the nearby hatch, reached for one of the chairs under the desks in front of him, put it on the desk, and tried to reach the hatch. He stretched his hands out as far as he could, grabbing the small red valve and turning it. Wait, isn't this just going to dump a bunch of water in? He thought as he was turning the valve. A loud female voice announced, Water protection system on. And the valve opened. The water was sitting there, stationary, not pouring in. Huh, said Jaquavius, looking at the water above, sitting still with nothing under it. Well, guess it's time to go up, Stool-Mutt said, grabbing out of the hatch and pulling himself up as Jaquavius soon followed. About halfway to the surface, the female voice announced once again, Home security protocol activated. Stool-Mutt forced his eyes open. The water stung, but he looked around the underwater facility. A hatch opened, releasing a robotic fish. Stool-Mutt shoved Jaquavius, which budged him into opening his eyes, seeing the piranha as well. While it raced towards them, Jaquavius began to swim away, but the fish rushed Stool-Mutt. Stool-Mutt grabbed the jaws of the fish, holding it back as it pushed him through the water. Stool-Mutt grabbed onto one of its eyes, trying to rip it out, but the speed jolted him off the fish completely. The fish began to rush back, grabbing his leg. Stool-Mutt felt the teeth sink into his leg, not enough to cause serious damage, but it hurt. As the fish began to rush around, Stool-Mutt grabbed his pocket knife from his bag and began to stab at the piranha. He jabbed at the in-between sections of the sheets of metal, trying to cut some wiring. He jabbed his knife in with his other hand, breaking off a piece of metal, and began to slice into the wiring. The fish's jaws began to loosen, just enough for Stool-Mutt to slip out and swim to the surface. Jaquavius was already on the surface, catching his breath as the fish came after him. He began to kick it as it swam to the shoreline. The fish grabbed his right leg right as he was about to hit the sand and started to drag him away. Right as it dragged Jaquavius away by his calf, Stool-Mutt came out of the depths and smacked it square in its already cut wiring with a stool, breaking it off Jaquavius' leg, and they both swam to shore. Damn! Even when we're looking for him, we can't escape the robots, Jaquavius said, glancing into the water, where the now deactivated fish was as it slowly sank. Thank God it's gone. Yeah, Stool-Mutt said. Where to now? Jaquavius said, looking at Stool-Mutt. The police station, he replied.